wonderful good afternoon from Hamburg, Germany, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for this very pragmatic webinar together with my friend and sector colleague, Mike. We get to introduce ourselves in a second. Today, we're talking about sort of 10 tips for better proposal writing. So it's a very pragmatic tip, and I hope that you will take some pragmatic tips away from that it improves you. And I hope that you find many things there that you already know and that you are already practicing. But introductions first. My name is Chris. I'm the Managing Director from MzN International. You know MzN in terms of our work where we help NGOs find funding and grow them. And I'm joined today by my dear friend and sector colleague, Mike, who knows everything about USAID, basically. Mike, is that right?
Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I appreciate the invitation to join you all and share maybe the nuance of MZN's expertise on the market overall, and then we can share some insight on more the nuances of the USAID market and the 10 best practices for proposal writing for that niche market. So again, thank you for joining and for all those participating. We're looking forward to your ideas as well. So if you have something not on our list, please put it in the chat.
Oh yeah, absolutely great. And what I really like about this, Mike, is that I think it's fair to say that MzN is fairly well experienced and well positioned in terms of European and EU market donor proposals, and you really cover the other side of the pond. You've actually worked at USAID, is that correct?
Well, so my background, I didn't work for USAID. I worked for AidKonekt International, which is USAID's largest implementing partner. And since 2013, we've helped organizations around the world, many in Europe, to assess how to enter the USAID market, or those who have already had a niche in the market, how to then start growing. And the unique thing with, well, we can get into this later, but with USAID, it's actually the proposal writing process usually comes later in the partnering process. So this is excellent for those who are looking to take that work to the next step. And as well as for all those USAID partners interested in expanding into the European aid markets, this should be a very excellent discussion to understand how your USAID process will then apply to other donors in Europe.
Great, looking forward to it. Let's dive right in. So we have lots of time for the questions afterwards. Just a few household tips. Ladies and gentlemen, before you ask, yes, this chat is recorded, and yes, the recording and the slides will be shared with you automatically in a couple of days or so. Therefore, by all means, feel free to concentrate on the conversation, ask questions in the Q&A function rather than trying to write down everything. Secondly, it is very hard, for me at least, to decipher questions from the chat function. So if you do have any questions, if you just want to get our view on it, put them in the Q&A right now, and we'll do them on a first come, first serve basis. So feel free, you can do this anytime between now and the end. Thirdly, the idea of a webinar that is a bit more interactive is that we get through the content fairly fast. I'm hoping for 20 minutes, half an hour. We've got about 10 slides only. So we've kept it very concise. That means we will not mention everything. So this makes no claim of being exclusive to all the things one should know when writing proposals. It is meant to hit the 10 most important things that my team around the world and I have observed people fall into pitfall-wise in the last 10 years or so, and that are hopefully help to avoid these pitfalls. There are additional resources on AidKonekt's website about USAID, on MzN's website about proposal writing in general and funding strategies, and a couple of them are linked in the resources here. And then we finalize it with an announcement, internal announcement, and then we're done for today. Good. That's the housekeeping done, I believe. Okay. Well,
let's get into the fun part then, Chris.
Sorry?
Let's get into the fun part then.
Let's get into the fun part, or the funding part. kind of phrase. It takes a lot. Proposal writing is a sort of love or hate relationship. People love to hate it, but undeniably, I would say it is the sort of bare knuckles and at the very core of what makes a growing NGOs. Note, please, I didn't say successful or impactful NGO. I said growing nonprofit. I'm very well aware of the difference here, and these 10 tips here are all designed and all have been elicited from our funding support partners, where MzN supports NGOs with identifying and writing proposals around the world for the last 10 years. And we came up with a list of 10 tips, which, as I said, they're not the only 10, but they seem to us for the last year and a half the most important ones. So first one is the preparation is all about the 6 Ps, and I will give a commendation and a sort of gold star to anybody who guesses what 6P is. Maybe, Mike, you can venture a guess after this. I'll give you a minute to think about it. Research, I'll talk about, Mike, about USAID research there. Briefly on the go, no-go decision. Then we go on to the theory of change, the team process, finally about how actually we take a whole of organization approach. So getting it out of the resource manager's task into the entire organization. A little bit back on strategy, how this is a marathon and not a sprint. And then 2 tips on budget, because a good budget is really half the battle. And all that then concludes in how to prepare for it, how to better pre-position yourself so that your next proposal has an increased chance of success. Right. Mike, I will happily sponsor you a beer or coffee wherever we're based if you now guess what 6 Ps means.
We have the 3 Ps, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit and go off of those. I'm gonna guess preparation is one of them. So capture phase preparation. It's
not bad. It's not bad. You're on the right track.
I'm gonna guess we have past performance. So focus on selling what you do well, and partnering. So who are the other organizations you're going to bring into this?
Oh, well, you're thinking way too complicated. Come on, I'll give you the solution, shall I?
All right.
I'll give you that in a second. Before I give that solution to you, sorry, currently down with COVID.
I think the chat's doing much better than I am.
Oh yes, if anybody guesses, then the solution is on the next slide. If anybody ventures a guess, then they get a gold star here. So the tips that we are going to give you today are around the 6 areas that are forming a proposal process. Every proposal, in whatever form you do, whether it's a concept note, whether it's a full-on proposal, whether it's a proposal to USAID, the EU, or European member states, or the UK, it doesn't really matter. Every proposal has these 6 key components: the problem statement, the rationale, the goal of what you want to achieve, how you achieve it, the strategies and activities, the impact, output, and outcomes. I don't want a big conversation on those, and ultimately the budget. So it's really useful if you bear that circle in mind to link our tips to the position in this circle where they're linked into, and the fact that they do link. We get back to this right at the end, but just bear that in mind right now. Good. If anybody guessed it, the 6P process, therefore, is prior proper preparation prevents poor performance. Yeah, it's nowhere near as complicated as what Mike tried to make it. And it is literally a salient truth that I really needs to be said again. Prior preparation for any proposal writing means to move from reactive proposal writing to proactive management of the funding portfolio. And that sounds great, but it breaks down to 4 key components again. Active pipeline management. A lot of NGOs who sort of come to us, and I'm working with them, and I used to be at Save the Children myself, we apply for what we can get. rather than proactively identifying what our strategy and the problem that we are trying to solve needs. And there's a huge difference between active pipeline management and reactive pipeline management, not at least of which is the case that if you actively manage the pipeline, it feels far more empowering than just being the recipient of opportunities to desperately apply for. It's a little bit like your job, your first job application right out of university or right out of school. If you are selective about your applications, you tend to submit better ones. It's the same thing with proposal writing, basically. It also feels, therefore, that you're not just at the mercy of the donors. We do have, and we do know some NGOs and NGOs who basically apply for them on whatever conditions donors put on it. And they're then surprised that this is the very hard to manage application process, very hard to manage a project once they get it. So I'm a firm believer of the sentence, not at all costs. Yes, we will do this, but ultimately be aware of your own value. The donor needs your expertise and your infrastructure there as well. Then, as part of the preparation, this is before we've even seen any sort of terms of reference or any call for proposals or concept notes, is show what that funding can achieve and what it can't. I'll get back to that in a second, but basically we have to acknowledge that no amount of funding is immediately solve all this world's problem. And that needs to be very clear in any terms of reference, in any project design. I'll get back to that again a couple of times here now. And very importantly, least but not last, is that the activity that you apply for, the project you're looking to apply for, needs to link to your strategy, not the donor's strategy. So the funding needs to match your need, the need you're trying to address, not the availability of a few donors. For that, research is absolutely important. And as we say here on the top right, you really should never be in a position, or we can strongly advise, to be surprised by an opportunity. I think the minute you're surprised by an opportunity, maybe Mike can say a few things about active research on USAID in a second, that would be great. But if you come across a call for proposals by, say, USAID or a European donor, and it strikes you like a breaking news, then that is a good sign that your pipeline management is way off. And I think that would already give me reasons to pause whether to apply for this or not, because usually it's too late for that stage. And Mike, I know you've you sort of built a whole platform around early information, right?
Yeah, Chris, that's exactly it. And that's what I've been taking notes on here, is with the active pipeline management, we've realized that was one of the most common complaints or pain points we heard from our clients, is that they always felt like they were in reactive mode, in putting out fires mode, and they're behind the curve. And to maybe put everyone at ease, everyone thinks everyone else is ahead of them. Everyone thinks that everyone is ahead of the pipeline, and everyone thinks they're the last person to know. So not everyone can be the last person to know. That said, what we did, that's exactly it, Chris, is we built a software to actively, I love that term, active pipeline management, to actively manage the pipeline so that your team's time, your consultants' time, are focused on putting together strong proposals and win strategies, not checking these sites every day, clicking through a bunch of government links to try to see what might be coming out next. On the never be surprised by an opportunity, I mean, I think we'll get to it later, but any good proposal writing starts before the proposal's released. So it's having a sense of what's coming out, what's going to be your proposal development strategy. To the extent you can, in some cases, you can do some preparation if there's some pre-solicitation information out. But yeah, never be surprised an opportunity. I would second that too. Is if you're surprised by an opportunity, then it's not necessarily means you shouldn't bid on it, but you should understand there's probably other people out there who haven't been surprised by it. So just understand the competition you'd be going against.
Perfect, Mike. That's absolutely correct. And if you are surprised by an opportunity, or if a TOR comes out and you kind of didn't know about it in advance, then know that your pipeline management is off somewhere. Here are 4 things. I'm not sure, can you actually see my cursor if I do this? So, yeah, thanks, Mike. Here are the 4 things you really should research before a proposal is given out. Look at your donor agencies, their strategies in the country or in the theme. USAID puts out great information quarterly and thematically. So does the European Union. So does the 3rd largest donor, which is now Germany, or rapidly becoming so. Research your partners and your foundations. Research your competitors. It's all pretty online now these days, so you know what minimum bars you have to clear. And explore the other NGO donor organizations, common portals and databases. There are quite a few of them. And research your fit. These are all things one should know before even writing a proposal. Now, then there is this go, no go decision. That obviously comes in once the concept call for proposals, call for quotation, or a call for concept notes is out. And for anybody who doesn't know, the go, no go decision is exactly the decision chart, what it says. It's a sort of flow chart that one should have in the organization by which to guide whether you're going for this proposal or whether you're not going for this proposal. And we've put some minimum requirements of what a go, no go decision should contain into the appendix at the end of this presentation to help you along. That will be sent out later to you, so no need to talk about it now. Just one interesting, and again, I would love to hear Mike on this one, interesting aspect is we've had an organization last year. They wanted to rapidly increase the number of proposals submitted. And they took a very different approach. They said, basically, instead of go, no-go decision, we'll turn this around into a no-go, go decision, i.e. we will go for every opportunity in these countries by these donors in these themes, unless we make an active decision not to. That has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage was that a lot more proposals got done because suddenly the business development section had to write a memo when not to write for something. It put the onus of, okay, why do we not do this? Had the disadvantage, of course, that yes, the amount of proposals increased, the success rate as a percentage reduced somewhat, because they just went out very wide and they've tripled the amount of submissions over a 4-month period. However, the absolute amount of wins increased sharply, so it had a successful sprint there. And I would say the other disadvantage is there that the business development team there was completely exhausted after 4 months. So we're talking about the whole organization approach there in a second. How was it at Chemonics, Mike? Did they have a pretty good go, no-go decision there?
Yeah, so I mean, what you're talking about there, Chris, I mean, that's the first thing I think about is that can work well for a sprint period and a growth period, yeah. As well as what I'll always say for USAID market is you can afford to bid on more proposals when you can afford to lose more proposals. So right. If you have that budget, if you have that support, where even for that go, no go, and is the decision when I'll talk with clients is your goal, I'll actually ask, is your goal to win this proposal or to learn about how the USAID proposal process works and lose the proposal? Because that's legitimate, and you have to go through that several times to really, and then you lose, you get the feedback, you go through it again, and it's really a multi-month, multi-year strategy to hone in on that process. Once you've honed in on that process, it can make sense, and there are many organizations that do have that you have to justify not going or a bid on everything approach, where we now know our expertise, if it's in a certain country, if it's with a certain donor, if it's a certain technical sector, and you need to give us a good reason why you're not going to bid on it. And in many cases, if that good reason is trying to be capacity, or we just don't have the capacity to bid on it, well, that's where the management usually says, well, then bring in a consultant, because we're not going to pass up on this opportunity. That's really where we have the most impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very good point. Thanks very much, Mike. Moving quickly on. Let's assume you've made the decision to go. Here are sort of the tips to show that your organization really was built for this. You've trained for this. I've seen tons of organizations who spent, months and years building a fantastic organization with a great theory of change, and then not showing it in a proposal. I don't understand why. Maybe the tailoring to the opportunity was too extreme. Maybe the form didn't allow it. Now, the bottom bases the theory of change, your impact model, in layman's term, your business case needs to be very clear, very compelling, and showing your expertise and why it had that expertise. Why that expertise is absolutely critical for success. Now, a theory of change is not something you just come up for every proposal, obviously. You may top and tail it for each one. And I want to share an example with another European sort of mid-sized, smallish to mid-sized NGO. We've done an analysis of their past proposals and found that their theory of change didn't translate to their proposals. So they've actually gone away and took a whole month of not bidding at all and invested into the development of a theory of change with a resident workshop. After that investment, that theory of change was put into what we call the signature package or the templates, into text blocks that had to be used. We even found a key that at least this many text blocks out of this many theory of change has to be copied into every proposal. We now know a year later, after going back to the proposals submitted then, that had a double-digit increase effect on their acknowledgements and on their success in their proposal rate. So, which is incredibly clear. If your theory of change template is better, your proposals get better. But the link between them needs to be made very, very clear. That said, agility and responsiveness. Absolute keyword. You may have heard the EU's announcement back in January that they expect every proposal, every theory of change to now be responsive to the context. Sounds incredibly obvious, but from a large bureaucracy like the EU, that's a big announcement, which means that even the straightforward humanitarian proposals are no longer set in stone. If the circumstances change on the ground, there should be greater ability to change it, which means in retrospect, donors expect that agility and responsiveness to be built in. My tip to you here, whilst your theory of change needs to be crystal clear, make sure that there is sufficient wording in there to say, we will respond and we will change the project methodology if circumstances change on the ground. I think that's a key development of the last 3-4 years. Would you say that, Michael?
Yeah, and Chris, I'd say too, yes, absolutely. And with USAID, even US Congress is having hearings discussing how they can make US government funding more agile. I think one consideration is not just in your technical approach, but you also have to think about your budget. How is your budget going to allow for more agile and responsive response to evolving needs on the ground and evolving donor demands?
Totally agreed. Perfect. We'll talk about that budgets in a few minutes. I absolutely agree, Mike. Last one to absolutely must have in every proposal is think local and think beneficiary driven programming. Should be very clear. Beneficiary needs assessment is sort of very 1990s. There needs to be a mechanism in most development programs and in many humanitarian right now that beneficiaries had a hand and a participation in designing the program, if at all possible, and that localization agenda is currently the hot button in the US right now, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. With the locally led development, where the target is 25%. And I was at a event with Administrator Samantha Power in December, where what's interesting is as we see what will be considered locally led. Is it, and the question that was brought up in that presentation was, is locally led just where the legal registration is of the organization that gets the funding, or is locally led the perspective? If an international organization hires a local consultant on the ground and that person, she leads the development of the program, is that considered locally led? So these are the types of questions that are being asked, at least in the USAID market right now.
Yeah, and the European Union is making moves in the same way. Certain donors in Germany have done this years ago for most programming in certain target countries. For GIZ, for example, a large percentage needs to be locally led. So that is certainly true. So agility, fear of change, and local teams. Quickly moving on, because there's a few more. Let's look internally, how we actually manage a proposal writing process as a team. And I strongly urge a sort of, I hate this word, this management talk, but whole of organization approach. Bottom line is a lot of even medium-sized NGOs or NGOs and other UN organizations, the resource manager, RM, or the business development manager is basically writing the proposal. And that I've been doing this now for 15 years. I've never seen it succeed once, not once. If one person writes a proposal, it always fails. And when I say write the proposals, I don't just mean physically write. I mean, if they make all the decisions, then that doesn't work. So I would strongly urge you to invest into just a half a day, a process in the organization to ensure that everybody who's involved, the country team, the finance team, the HR team, and yes, the business development team has a role to play in the pipeline. Again, that goes back to active pipeline management, making sure that when we know which person has to be inputting which part of the document. In any organization these days, the documents live online on a platform, be it Microsoft, Google, or whatever resource enterprise system you use anyway, even if it's just email, probably less ideal, but possible. Make sure that everybody had a chance to input and be heard.
Can I just put one point on there, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Two models I've seen, and I think it's important to be self-aware of what type of organization you are, is we'll say there's the programs team that implements the work, and the business development team. And there's some organizations where the programs team thinks it's the business development team's job to keep winning more money, so they have jobs and they have more projects to do, but they have minimal input on it. And then there's another model I see with organizations where everyone in the finance department, in the HR department, in all the support units, everyone's job is to support business development and proposal development. And both can work, obviously, because they both exist. Obviously, the more people are involved in it, the more effective it is. But I think as a starting point, it's good to think through what type of organization are you? One where the business development team has the support from everyone, or the business development team is seen as their job is to keep winning funding so everyone else has a job and can keep implementing the work.
No, absolutely. Actually, Mike, interesting enough, we've done some research on this one back in 2016, 2017 on these two models you just described. It's not part of this webinar, strictly speaking, but we found that with the previous model, i.e. where everybody thought, the business development team, they should write a proposal so we all have a job to, and we all have projects to implement, they tend to grow less, unsurprisingly. And the reason is not because they submit less proposals. No, it's because if the program managers and the people in country and closer to the topic, either geographically or thematically, are driving proposal development in some material way, then the subject matter evolves faster, which makes the proposals more up to date. Because we're dealing with a scientific organization at the moment. And scientists have great new ideas almost every other week, which the business development team does not have. And it might be that new idea, that new way of implementing that attracts the donor. So it's just more innovative this way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm moving on. I'm jumping a little bit right now, and I want to jump to the last point here. If anybody got any questions about this middle point, then put them in the Q&A, please. Because I'm worried about timing here. Show your readiness and your expertise. How do you work together? Your credentials, your track record, your expertise should be ready on day one. It's a very pragmatic tip. But what I'm saying is that your experience, track record, your credentials, and what you have as a proven concept that you've done this, they shouldn't be written as part of the proposal. They should be in some template. You might need to slightly amend them, But if they're not there on day one, they consume an incredible amount of time. Bear in mind, most concept notes and even most proposals these days have on average about 28 days between announcement and deadline. That's not a lot of time, particularly when you consider that, general people are working partially from home, hybrid, off sick, have other commitments. Your active proposal writing time has been squished massively over the last few years. And we are now down to what is pragmatically, 2.5 weeks. So that's 10, 12 days for several multi-million proposals partially. So you don't have time to then go back to the drawing board and write up your credential list or your project reports. So make sure that they are part of your 6 Ps prior preparation. Good. Finally, almost finally, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We've seen this time and time again where organizations have a massive sort of almost volcanic effort in writing and submitting a huge proposal, and then the team who submitted sort of hangs in the balance like this, and are completely exhausted. They've spent all their unrestricted funding on it, and they desperately cling their hopes on this one proposal. That is a strategy doomed to fail. In other words, never write one proposal when you could also write 10 on the same topic. And a good part of pipeline management and opportunity identification, which is why research is so important, is if this is a major proposal and you are going to sink some time and money into it, please research if that is a standalone proposal or whether you can do that proposal to 3 other donors as well, or 10, whatever. So that you can, even if you fail in one, you can continuously improve on it, because guess what? If we continuously improve on it, the success rate increases. And again, that prior research is absolutely essential. Good. Now then, with the budget, obviously make it a realistic, sustainable budget. Don't overpromise, but have a clear VFM rationale, I value for money. You remember back from the early 2000s, the former Department of International Development in the UK led the VFM debate. There needs to be a very clear unit cost, a very clear cost-saving initiative to the alternative. And if you know your competition, you can show a higher VFM that way. That's usually a very good argument. That said, once you've been very clear on VFM, there's a particular webinar on MzN last year just on VFM, value for money. And you may have some questions on it right now, so we can also dive into that. Be ready to negotiate and know what not to agree on. This is again back to our first point. Some donors have unrealistic expectations, stringent overhead conditions, say 7%, for example, and that sort of perpetuates an NGO's starvation cycle, as I call it. I would strongly recommend not agreeing to that, even though there seems to be money there for the taking in the short term. Mike, does that resonate with your experience?
Yes, with the only exception being we're going to a strategic decision to start working in a new region or a new technical area. Okay, we know we're going to lose money in the business, in the private sector, a loss leader. We're going to lose money on this, but we want to gain the experience working in this area. But yeah, exactly. And also know for the budget by donor, what your home office rent, should that be a direct billable cost? Can that be wrapped into overhead? So really to understand, how do the donors like to see their costs allocated? For some, as you point out, there just isn't flexibility, but for some there is flexibility. It's just a matter of understanding what are the unique interests of that donor. And some of them, like Usaid, do reimburse a lot of costs, but they like to see them all written up, spelled out line by line, not just rolled up into a flat overhead number. Absolutely.
Flat overheads are going to be disallowed anyway, so you hurt yourself twice by incurring them and then not being able to charge them. So you're absolutely right, Mike. Okay, budget. We're talking about money. Let's talk about it a bit more. I like that picture my colleague put in there. It's very true. Plan enough time. There are a few beginner's mistakes, we call them. And we see them with every sized organization. Incorrect calculations. The donor template hasn't been used. The budget exceeds the terms of reference. We've had a proposal the other day where the donor submitted a proposal, a budget form, an Excel sheet you had to fill in, and that sheet had an arithmetic mistake in there. You can imagine a small comma or a small plus or whatever it was missing, what that cost in the program design. Organizations who only spotted that 4 or 5 days before submission time then try to change their project methodology to fit a wrong total. I mean, that is just a beginner's mistake. Then you want to get the balance between not enough details, not too much. I'm going to talk about this a little more, but you really ultimately trying to achieve a balance between budget and impact. One of the core mistakes is to automatically go for the maximum available. I'm going to mention this in the next one here. You want to justify your expense. So Mike, what you just said, it's basically worthwhile bearing in mind that a budget is nothing else but a communication tool. It can say a lot more about the program than your organization. In 2016, for example, we've done some analysis of ECHO proposals, and we found that the second most common reason for rejections is because of an incorrect or unappealing budget. So get the budget right, and you may already are a nose length ahead of it. And some good features here are the openness, disclose what you want and be completely open in how you charge for things. Obviously, you don't want to overlay with information. Value for money, we talked about it. We've got a few questions on that. We'll answer those. Be very clear on what you're charging for, what capacity you have, and what it costs. Be very aware of your competitiveness, feeds into the value for money conversation, but you could also, for example, calculate alternative forms of addressing the problem and then showcase that that is more expensive. It's a very good argument for value for money. And obviously compliance. Certain compliance rules are pretty extensive. Some are fairly straightforward. I think it's fair to say that USAID's is fairly comprehensive, Mike, isn't it?
Yeah. For USAID, if you're new to it, you definitely want to have someone on your team that understands USAID cost, best practices, and regulations.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So be aware of this first. Hopefully that gives you an impression that leaving the budget to 4 or 5 days before the deadline is bound to end in disaster. At worst, you will submit something that is half cooked, and the budget, as I said, is a major failing reason. At the very worst, you won't be able to submit, in which case all the narrative work has been lost.
And one easy way that you can do this is make sure your cost preparer, your budget preparer, is engaged with your proposal team from the start.
Yes.
So have them involved in the first meetings on that regular communication, not just someone you're going to bring in the last week to say, here's the proposal, go figure out how much it's going to cost.
Great. And another pragmatic tip here, since we're talking about this, there's a level of non-direct cost in any proposal, your office rent, your printers, your non-project staff. Those should be on a sheet as part of your preparation templates. There is absolutely no reason why those should not be prepared in advance on an annual basis, each January, for example, so that you know what core costs you have to cover and what core costs you might be able for different donors to attribute to the proposal as a direct cost, and thereby increase your unrestricted element. Good. Start then. Treat your budget development as a project in itself. You can tell we are talking about the budget a lot because that's where we fail a lot. Develop the project plan with a timeline and make sure that that timeline fits the proposal requirements, of course. And then at that point, build in time for your budget review and approval. Budget review, particularly for fairly sizable proposals, takes a massive time of the organization to get approved by your own staff, by your colleagues, to make sure it's in full compliance, as Mike just said. So that approval process really does take a chunk of time. I've seen proposal approval process which take 2/3 of the entire proposal writing time. So bear that in mind. Inform the stakeholders of the information requirements. Very important. You might, for example, need a logbook for all your vehicle usages in the country that you're using. If you don't start that logbook on day one, you're losing money every day as you implement the program. And you cannot retrospectively design it. So this is lost from day one, which means you really want to inform your project staff right off the bat. And ultimately, the financial requirements, as Mike just said, Mike, I completely agree with you. There are some donors which are so evolved, I'm going to say. The EU is certainly one of them. The USAID is certainly one of them. KfW in Germany as well, where the financial requirements in themselves are science, and you may want to get some help on that one, making sure that you have the correct templates, the correct information, and that once it's approved, those templates are used in the program development.
One other thing I'd add, and I see this especially with universities, is understand who in your organization needs to have final approval on any budget numbers, or if you have any discounted numbers, and also know if they're going to be on vacation during a submission week when you need approval from them. And so just thinking through, okay, you can't just, when does that decision need to be made? Is in some cases proposal teams work on weekends, they submit on a Monday. Maybe you're not going to be able to get in touch with that person over the weekend. So just think ahead to who's going to have to make that final decision and make sure they're accessible, or that you get the decision from them before they go on vacation or offline.
Great. And seeing as we can go offline almost at any time these days with general illnesses, I'm afraid, or carers' responsibilities, one of the smartest things I've seen an academic organization do is give approval variances, i.e. this director approves on Friday, 3 weeks before it's due, a proposal of 1 million plus minus 15%. And then if the project design finishes, changes slightly, as it always does, 10 days before the final submission, and it's still within that 15% or so, you don't need to go back again. I think that was one of the very smart things to do. Fine, we're nearly done, sorry. There is, these are sort of our top 10 tips. There is another downloadable 10 tips sheet on our website. We'll send the link out with that. I can briefly show it here, I believe. 1 second. It's right here, the 10 tips of proposal writing from May 21. Here you have another 10 tips. We'll put the link into the chat box right now. And then finally, an announcement briefly from all of us. Sorry, there we are. We talked about funding and proposal writing for the last 40 minutes or so. In 2020, a lot of you have asked for support on fundraising, campaigns and raising unrestricted. And we did listen to that one, and it took us a very long time, almost 2 years, to build a fundraising service that generates income at a low cost for the long term. So compensating that restricted funding and making sure we do not end up in the starvation cycle that we referred to earlier. I'm very pleased to say that we are now days away on the 11th of April from launching a 100% digital in 9 languages available fundraising service with strategy, results management, graphic design, video production, social media, and whatnot in there. And maybe you'll join us for the launch of that one. We've been operating in stealth mode for the last year and a half, and it goes public next month. And then finally, more
congratulations,
tips.
Chris. That's very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. That's congratulations to you and the team, and that's going to be a wonderful service for the industry.
Thanks. I hope it will really, it works well with these trial accounts so far. And I'm looking forward to support NGOs on that, addressing that second funding stream. And finally, of course, more events on the website, including the funding support, and Mike's details will be shared there as well. Mike, before we go to the question, what have I forgotten?
nothing that you've forgotten. I just wanted to say a couple points on USAID, and I know we had some questions. Why are we talking about USAID? So USAID, obviously, people know is a large bilateral, but it's actually last year they gave out about $25 billion, and that's up from since the Bush administration started PEPFAR shortly after 2000 through the Biden administration. It's gone up under every administration. So we're seeing that growing funding amount. We're also seeing the new partnerships initiative, which is in USAID is actively looking for both local, but also new partners globally in North America, in Europe, that they can engage with on their programs. So with that in mind, a couple of nuances for the USAID market that we really focus on for best practices for proposal development is, one, identify your full proposal team ahead of time. So who's going to, like Chris said, who's going to do the budget, who's going to write, who's going to do the recruitment, and do you have that capacity in-house, or do you have to bring in consultants externally? If so, have that strategy in place. Also, develop that for USAID, develop that proposal calendar the day a proposal's released. And so start with what's the submission date, and then an industry standard is submitting 2 business days before that submission date, then back out all the decisions from there. When are the different proposal reviews done? When are the partners confirmed? And the other thing I'd say is with USAID, as with any donor probably, is the best practice is to follow directions, is to read their proposals, to read their strategies, understand what USAID is asking for, and really answer not as much in, here's our idea, can you give us funding? But instead, USAID, we understand your strategy, here's how we can help you achieve those goals. So as I put a note in there, we have the full white paper, happy to send it to anyone. Just send me an email and we'll send that over.
Great, Mike. If you link me that white paper, we'll make sure in the follow-up email it's referred to as well. I think that makes total sense. Great. So we are bang on time. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've got a couple of questions. First come, first serves. And first question is from Mumbalaya Crespo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if not. What comes first when writing proposals? Well, I hope that you now sort of would say the same thing, and I would absolutely say that research is the most important part, and it comes way before writing proposals. And please research with a mind that you write not one proposal, but 50 in the same country, in the same topic. Mike, anything to add there?
No, that I would agree. Yeah, research, understand who you're going with, and maybe don't get entirely wrapped up 100% of the time in your idea, but really make sure you're spending time understanding what's that donor looking for, what type of angle are they interested in funding.
I completely agree. An anonymous attendee has asked, is it really possible to negotiate overheads with big institutions, e.g. EU calls? The short answer to that one is no. There are rules for various donors, either 7% for most EU things, a little bit more for other pots. USAID has the famous or infamous NICRA system. Most UK donors are around the 7 or 8%. Most German donors are around 10 or 11% overheads. But on the overheads, the devil lies in the detail. So if you can directly attribute what you would classically think of as an overhead, if you can make that as a direct allocation to the project, then it no longer is an overhead, but it's suddenly become a project cost. So therefore that increases your bottom line. So how you actually deal with this is, there's no flexibility in there. And if you're smart on budgeting, you can certainly increase your unrestricted element considerably. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, with USAID, right, there's the NICRA. Not to be intimidated by that, you can work as a subcontractor or subgrantee without a NICRA. There's a variety of ways that you can still engage on those projects. And then if there is a contract with a fee on it, often that fixed fee amount is negotiable. If you're the subcontractor, you're actually negotiating with the prime contractor, or if you're the prime, then you are negotiating that with the with USAID. that negotiation often would happen between the prime and the sub during the proposal development process. But with the prime and USAID, it can often be after or at the time of award when they're preparing to sign a contract.
Absolutely. Great. Then another one asked, are there short or long proposals more desirable? How much should we repeat ourselves between template section? I'm finding it very hard to answer that outright. The fact is that different sections of different proposals are reviewed by different people, particularly for very large assignments and projects. However, cross-references are perfectly fine. That should avoid most repetition. If you find yourself repeating the same thing over and over, that basically makes your entire proposal poorer. There's space to answer the question in these sections. I would answer that question rather than talk about something else. Good. And a few more comments. I've noticed that there are many MzN partners out here, including people from War Child, for example, from Save the Children, from Oxfam. Be aware, please, that all of you are MzN partners already, so which means you do have the ability and the right to draw down free training anywhere in the world. I know for War Child right now there's a 6 or 8 weeks, might be 5 weeks, online course on proposal writing, on business development, delivered right now. If you don't know who within War Child that is, that takes place in English and in French as well for War Child. By all means, contact me and I'll connect you to your colleague who has organized that. And all MzN partners get free training on proposal writing, pre-selection, value for money, finance, etc., and all these things. And I'm absolutely certain that in some of these sessions, if anybody has particular questions about how to research USAID, I'm going to ask my friend Mike to join in.
I'd be very happy to join, Chris. Absolutely.
And you've all heard that, so he's committed now on the record.
It's recorded on the
record.
In perpetuity.
We'll take a vote on that one. Eliza, you just asked whether War Child Holland is providing this training. No, this training is provided by MzN, but War Child is an MzN partner, and therefore they can get it for free. Right, we are bang on time, which pleases the German part of me. Are there any more questions, thoughts, ideas, or comments, or Mike, anything that we have forgotten?
One thing just to note on the proposal length is USAID will have very specific page requirements. One thing to think about with those page requirements is not just the number of pages, but the amount of white space on the paper. So thinking in terms of, okay, we have 20 pages. In the US, it's typically 8 inches by 11, or 8 by 11 inch paper. So how much square space of how much space do you have to communicate on there? Should that best be done with a paragraph? Should it be done with an infographic? Should it be done with a quote? So sometimes if you're going over, well, maybe we can take 2 pages of text and summarize it in an infographic. So thinking very strategically about how do you use really each centimeter, each inch of the proposal to maximize hitting on the win themes and communicating why you are the best to implement a certain program.
That's great news. And seeing as what I've also seeing as you just gotten stipulating my brain, one of the best tips I've actually learned from another NGO about 10 years ago is what they call the redundant word test, or the grammar test. They've printed it out physically and struck every word out that wasn't necessary. I think that reduced the number of words quite significantly. But again, as you can tell, this means involving someone else. So take this whole of organization tip and make sure that that is done days before submission. And finally, once you've got the text, use it for more than one proposal, because it's, your work really is worth it. Right, a couple of final notes. The recording, the slides, the resources that Mike has referred to, Mike, if you could send me that link again. The link to the other MzN sort of 10 top tips, as well as a check sheet for proposal writing, will all be emailed to you in a couple of days automatically. The recording with closed captioning option will also be made available in that. Finally, if you are an MzN partner and you need more training on proposal writing, please reach out to my colleague Deborah, and she would love to organize a session for you. As I said, we do that now free of charge. MzN's strategy is to make most or all of our NGO services free of charge by 2030. And we have gotten there already when it comes to capacity building and training. Thank you very much for your time, for your willingness to ask questions. If there are any questions that you didn't get to ask or we didn't get to answer, by all means, please just send us a note, and one of my team or myself will get back to you. And Mike, thank you so much for joining us from what looks like a very sunny US.
Yes, it is wonderful. Chris, thank you. Thank you to the whole MzN team for putting this together. It's always a pleasure talking with you. For anyone interested in the Usaid market, again, happy to have that follow-up conversation. Also, be sure to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. We have some upcoming events with Chris and the team as well. So all of our events are announced both on AidKonekt and on our LinkedIn platform. So connect with us there, and look forward to seeing you all on future events. And Chris, again, thank you to the whole team for doing a great job putting this together, and excited about the upcoming announcement you all have.
Thank you very much, Mike, and everybody stay healthy and possibly very happy. Good night.
Bye, everyone.